Now we move on to the 9th module. Here the first question is about how do you deal with pressure? They are asking you for your stress management skills. How do you deal with pressure? So in stress management, we understand that action-oriented strategies are possible. When you have too much pressure, what will you do to relieve that pressure? Very often, if you are pressurized, you might start walking and so on. That is stress releasing. Or you have adaptation orientation, where you handle pressure and you control pressure. These are also possible. Of course, making your mind strong, giving your thoughts a positive orientation, that is one way of dealing with pressure. So you handle the pressure, but you don't get upset by the pressure. That is one way of looking at it. Now, how will you handle conflict? Many questions might come about stress, about pressure, and conflict also is one kind of stress. If somebody fights with you, somebody raises their voice and shouts at you, then what would you do? Suppose you are in conflict with your boss. Your superior officer says something, you don't agree. Since you don't agree, you tell that person, and that person doesn't listen. That person says, no, you have to do what I'm telling you to do. Results in a conflict. Then how will you handle it? How will you handle that conflict? Again, I will use the same word which I used earlier in team building. I said conciliatory. So since the boss is the decision maker, and as a subordinate, you are not a decision maker, you are compelled to listen to your boss. But if you can logically explain and your boss is willing to listen, then you can handle the conflict. If you don't lose your temper, even if your boss loses his or her temper, you remain cool and calm, and you do not say the same things in the same rude voice which that other person might be using. Then you are good at conflict management. The interviewer will be impressed if you are able to say that even if I have the conflict with the boss, I will be able to give my point of view in a very even tone, in a very logical and rational manner. If the boss is unwilling to listen, or if the boss is insulting me, I will not retaliate. Retaliate means to do the same thing. This I will not do. I will not insult the boss. This shows that you are a forgiving person. You are not a revengeful person. These are qualities which they are looking for. They will understand that you have control over your emotions. You are not a person who gives in to your emotions. So when they find that you are intelligent emotionally, you are intelligent intellectually, you are intelligent in your handling of life situations, then they will say, this is a suitable candidate for us. This is the way in which, without saying so much, we impress the interviewer. The interviewer is impressed only when we give our genuine ideas. Then suppose you have a conflict with your colleagues. Conflict with your colleagues can be resolved when you are working at the same level. This is what we call as horizontal. So you are able to talk to your colleagues, not like the boss who's above you and you are below, but the colleague is horizontal. You have more freedom to talk to the colleague. So communication and understanding are two things which are required. Suppose you have a conflict with a colleague, try to communicate by saying, why are we in conflict? Communicate with yourself. Communicate with the other person who's in conflict, who's fighting with you. Communicate with that person. And then what do you find? You find that the conflict can be resolved by understanding the other person's point of view. We always understand our own point of view. We say, oh, whatever I say is correct. Whatever the other person says is not correct. Therefore, problem. We have to go out of ourselves and understand the other person. Unless we do that, we cannot resolve the conflict. With colleagues, we have that freedom to understand and communicate. But in cases where the colleague is also a friend, where you know the colleague very well, there you can always demand. You can always say, why are we in conflict? Why is it that you are fighting with me or you are treating me badly? That freedom you don't have with anybody else except a friend. So if a colleague is a friend, you can have that process of confrontation also as resolution. If you are able to give these ideas, because if you're a fresher, you would not have had a boss, you would not have had a colleague, but you have had classmates and you have had a principal or a teacher or a head of the department. So these examples you can always give, but you must give the theoretical dimension. What will you do in future if your boss and you are in conflict? If your colleague and you are in conflict? That is, we are talking about the future. Now it comes, suppose you're in conflict with your subordinates. We often ill-treat our subordinates. So that ill-treatment is very bad. We have to remember that even though the subordinate is on a lower scale, they are human beings and we should respect human beings. So here, resolving conflict requires respect for a person, whatever their position in the company. Even if they are lower in rank than you, please respect them. That is important. All other factors also work, which I mentioned already, but respect comes here. Boss, you will respect automatically. Colleagues, you will communicate, obviously, because they also have a position, you will respect them. But subordinates respecting comes very rarely. Many people don't respect their subordinates. They treat them badly. Suppose there's a peon who gets you tea every day. Very often you don't call the peon respectfully, you do like that. Now the peon is not to be called by, clicking or flicking your fingers. It is so rude to a subordinate. So that person will feel insulted if you treat a person like this. Conflict is bound to happen. Conflict resolution always requires that we are going to meet the other person halfway. If we can meet the other person halfway, that is good. Now describe a serious conflict. Now they are asking you for example. Till now they did not ask example. Describe a serious conflict you had with a person in authority. You might have had school or college if you're a fresher, with your boss or your chairman of the company if you are already working. You can describe this real conflict. Again, remember, real example, not borrowed example, not copied example. No imitation is allowed. We should only take what is genuinely our own example. So, resolving the conflict with the person, give an example using all these skills which I mentioned here, using all these traits which I mentioned here. With that, we come to the end of the 9th module.